So my name is Janet Holmes and I live here in northern Iowa. We had Dakota Access came through in 2016 and put a oil pipeline through. We were asked in late 17, 2018, if we would help document the finding or document the damages. The reason the landowners came up here to us was because we are impartial. We are not, and we're not impacted by the pipeline. We're we're an agronomy company. I am not an agronomist. I was just tasked with documenting all the damage. The gentleman that owns the company has been an agronomist. He's a PhD agronomist, has owned the company for over 30 years. We don't sell chemicals. We do soil sampling. We do compaction testing, water infiltrations, organic farming, things of that nature. So what I did, how I came about with the documentation that Peg is going to go through with you is, in Iowa, if they're going to grant a permit for putting in a pipeline, the company who was Dakota Access had to write an agricultural impact mitigation plan. And it was this plan that they sold, how they're not going to damage your land, how they're going to come in, they're going to very gently move this topsoil, they're going to move your subsoil, they're going to lay in the pipe, and they're going to put everything back. And in 3 years, you will never know that they were there. It's been since 16, and you can still see the scar on Google Maps where the pipeline went through the land. A couple landowners fought hard and got their CRS2s, which is their corn suitability ratings, lowered, which is unheard of. And we have landowners that one gentleman still has a $150,000 estimate to fix his tile because Dakota Access says, nope, they won't do it. They already did it once, they're not going to do it again. The problem is when they did it, they never used any kind of survey equipment. So the tile is going the wrong direction, so it won't drain. So it's those kind of things. So one of the things that Dakota Access was supposed to do was to notify individuals of the path. And they didn't want to do that because they didn't want people to rally together. And that's huge. You have to stay together. Thank you so much. You have to band together. If you do not, it's going to be much harder for you. So in this video, in this picture here, they are supposed to remove all the topsoil. It doesn't matter if it's 5 feet, 3 feet, 12 inches. This landowner in writing said, I want you to remove all of my topsoil before you put any equipment on there. And what they're doing is that they're driving out there. They've already cleared his beans, and they're driving out there with their heavy equipment. And what they did is what they're doing called potholing. And this gentleman has a tile that goes down like 12 feet. And they're trying to find the tile because they're going to have to cut the tile. So the pipeline, the direction of that black topsoil is the direction of the pipeline. So they're trying to find it. And so they never removed any topsoil. So now they're driving on it and they're compacting it. And what I want to make sure you understand is that I want you to imagine taking a brand new loaf of bread, a nice white loaf of bread, okay? And you've got 4 kids that want sandwiches. Now you put that on end and squish it like this. And now you try to make sandwiches because that's what they're doing to this soil. Next, please. So they did remove the topsoil, but it's on both sides. They're supposed to put it all on one side, and they didn't. And they didn't remove it all because you can tell because it's black. And so they're driving all over on it, compacting it down. And it's just, it's a mess. And if you look in the back part of it where you can see all of the subsoil, now they're mixing it all. Next, please. And so here they're putting in a valve station. And if you see these vehicles that are parked, they're parked with their license plates to the back for a reason. In Iowa, you have to have a license plate on the front and the back. These vehicles do not. And the pipeline company touted that they were going to bring in jobs. We never saw one Iowa license plate on any of these things. These are all people from out of state. The other thing is that you're going to notice that there's where these vehicles are parked and they're putting in this valve site. They had to bring in 10 dump trucks full of topsoil to try to bring that back up to grade because they compacted it so bad. And the landowner had to fight with this tooth and nail and explain to them, you compacted my soil. Nothing will ever grow there again. You've compacted it down so many feet. And you can Google compaction and decompaction, and they're written all over the world. You can find all different countries. You can find documentation of once you compact the soil, you cannot uncompact it because mechanically you can only go down so far before you start causing more compaction when you're trying to do the decompaction. So here you also see there's some big pieces of timber, and that's what they call matting. And they put those down when it gets really muddy, and they're supposed to remove them and they don't. And there's some more pictures on that one. But so it's just very obvious that they did not remove the topsoil. They drove on the topsoil, they compacted the topsoil, and they mixed all of the subsoil that's on the other side, and they're driving on that, which is also something they said that they would not do. Next, please. So this is what they're doing here is that they found the tile, and now, and this is a 30-inch pipeline. So Summit says, well, we're not going to use that heavy of equipment. We're not going to use that much equipment. Well, you kind of have to, depending on how deep you go for the tile. You have to make it a wide area to be able to get the pipe below it. You have to have, in Iowa, you have to have 3 feet separation from between the pipeline and the tile. And trust me, you do not want to go near that pipeline. And actually, you're forbidden to go through the pipeline. And so if your tile is under there, you can never repair it. You can never replace it. You can never do anything with it. So they're going 3 feet deeper than where the tile is. And so that's why they had to go this deep. And so again, they drove all over it. And you can kind of see in the middle towards the soybeans, there's a little black bag. But what happened is that it rained. And then it got muddy. And they're not supposed to be out there if it's going to leave a rut. And you can see that it's rutted. And there's better pictures of the rutting. Next, please. So here's another one where they said that they removed all the topsoil, and they did not. They are just pushed it off to one side. And what they're doing, they don't really care about the topsoil. What they're doing is they want to make it level so they can go ahead and make it easier for them to put the pipeline in. And if you have tiling and stuff and you disturb all those contours, your drainage is now all changed. And so here that shows too that how wet it was when they were out there. And so with that wet, you've compacted it even more. And causing more damage. And this is on the right of way, and it was just too wet. And they said in their agricultural impact mitigation plan that they wouldn't be out there when it was too wet, but this is too wet. Next, please. So here they are in another spot doing the same thing with the potholing, because they said, oh, well, you know, and that's the other part of it too, is that Dakota Access made the agreement that these people are Precision Pipeline, and they don't know anything about the agreement, nor do they care. They were told they were supposed to put in so many miles of pipe per day. But you can see here that they're doing the same thing, that they're mixing the soil, and they've got heavy equipment, and you can tell by the tracks that they're driving all over the topsoil, and they did not remove it all. Next, please. So here they are putting down the pipe, and you can see how they have gone ahead and mixed all that soil up, because it used to be black. And they did their potholing, they found where their tile were, and here they found where the tile were, and they're mixing it up. They didn't remove it all, and so now they're getting ready to lay the tile. And you can see in one of the notations, they will work at night, so the inspectors aren't there, and the inspectors aren't stopping any of this. Next, please. So in here you can see too how they're mixing all the soils up, and here they're putting the pipe in, and they've left those gaps in there because that's where tile is that they have to reconnect later. And you can see there's kind of a little black fence on the right hand side. That's supposed to help keep the water in, because when it rains, which it did, it fills those pits up, and then they have to pump that water, and here it is better. They pump all that water, they pump it out into the fields, which is what they call dewatering. Well, now you have just put all of this clay sludge on your prime topsoil, which will kill your plants because of the pH and everything of it. And so again, they have mixed it. This shows where there's a tile, there's a stake in the middle of there. That topsoil is actually like 3 feet deep. And then it goes down into subsoil, and then it goes down to the parent material. And it's clear that they did not remove, and they will not remove your topsoil, because they don't have time for that. They don't have the storage for it, and they don't care. Next. And here's just another picture in a different location showing that they did not remove all the topsoil. Next, please. So this is the location where they had parked all that material, all those pickup trucks. And this is a big sump pump that they're using to try to dry that area out so they can go back out and work. And these are the big timbers that they call matting. And yeah, so it's so compacted, this water cannot drain on its own now. It's almost like concrete at this point. That's how bad, how bad it's been compacted. Next, please. So this is a 18-inch pair of pliers, and this is a rut in the mud. And they are not, and according to the plan that they wrote and agreed to, they would not be out on anybody's farmland if it was going to leave a rut. Well, that's a 36-inch rut. Next. So this is one of the landowners, and he's got a spade out there. And the one picture on the left is a spade going all the way down to the ground where he's got his corn. And the one on the right, he can't get it in half an inch because they've compacted and mixed his soil so badly. And that's one of the things that they will not talk about is compaction. They avoid using that word at all costs. So this is another picture. It's a blow up of the one earlier. But it shows you how much equipment they take. They have to have these big pieces out there to hold the pipeline in place. And that square thing in the middle is where they're welding. And then they have to have the backhoe out there to try to fill it in to continue to hold it in place so it doesn't break the welds and everything. But you can see how they have just destroyed the soil makeup now, the microbial life of everything, because they brought up all that parent material from 30 feet down and they put it on top of your topsoil, and they've got all this equipment up there. And any farmer knows that there's a whole science behind tractors, tires, pressure, material, so you don't compact. Next, please. And so this is just another picture showing how they have turned this field into a highway, and they have mixed it in. And there's all these timbers that they are now driving on that are also in the ground. And we have landowners that are still bringing that up when they're working their soil. Next, please. And here's another picture showing how wet the conditions were, but they're still out there working. Here they're actually trying to work on tile. And I've shown this to several tilers in our area, and they've made it very clear you can't work on tile when it's that wet, because there's no stability for the tile. Here the equipment is sinking in 3 feet, and it's showing, again, the compaction, the rutting, and the mixing, and it's continual. It didn't stop for many, many landowners. Next. So here they are driving all over, not just the right of way, but they're driving all over this gentleman's field. And here's another one. And because once and these people signed easements, and they said, oh, we're going to stay on the right of way. Well, what they found out is that once they signed the easement stated they could do whatever they wanted to on the entire parcel. And it didn't matter how big or small it was, and they did. So they had to get that changed. Here again, they are working on repairing tile that got destroyed because of it was so wet, and there's matting, these pieces of wood called matting, that broke, and they drove over it like here, and it broke the tile, and the matting went through that. And the back of this cat there, those are called tow ropes, because these things are continually getting stuck, and they have to get semis out there to pull them out. Next, please. And here's just another one showing how deep they're going. This one's stuck too. He's out there. And this is what they call drying out. Here's the matting material, and you can see the big pieces of iron re-rod that goes through to hold them together. And they just snap, and they leave all that there, and they leave these big mats there. And here's another big piece when they were out there trying to work their farm, and that's a huge piece of wood. That's not a little sliver. Next. And so what they do to what they call drying out the soil is they take these big backhoes and they push these huge mud balls off to the side so they don't get stuck anymore. So now they're removing even more, and they're mixing even more. And these piles are not small, but that's how they dry out the soil so they can keep working. And that's a hat on top of one of these big mud balls. And then these things turn into huge, gigantic clods, and you can't break them up. And so then the farmers try to go and work, and they can't. And so here they're into all of the clay, and you see that piece of wood there. Well, that piece of wood is what broke a tile, and that tile is now causing, because it's so wet out, it's flooding out the area. And they're trying to fix it while it's wet. Next. Here's a farmer, because they didn't put the tile in deep enough, and so they went out to work the soil. The pipeline company did, to do their what they called restoration, and it's too wet for any of that, and they ripped everything out of the ground. And so they put the tile in these metal tubes, and they say that that's going to protect it. Well, it just crushes that metal. So all of that had to get replaced. Here you can see they're trying to work on tile, and the tile had been crushed, and it flooded out the field. And so they're out there in the wet trying to fix it, because they don't want to wait for it to dry out, because they need to move on. And this is Ellingson, the same tile company, I believe, that they're from Minnesota. It's the same company that I believe that they're going to be up in your way too. But they're out there working in this muck, and it's going to happen again. And it did happen again. Next. So here they are with the dewatering, and you see this little thing off to the left, and there's a person out there with this big black bag and these hay bales, and that's how they're supposed to contain the silt water. Well, in actuality, there's a hose going from there out into his bean field. And you can see the hose there, and those bags they're overfilled. They've exploded. Excuse me. They've exploded on other farms too. I just picked this one because they need to get that water out of there so they can keep working. And that is And so then when you call them on it, they just say, oh, well, how much money do you want? You want $1,000? Well, no, you permanently damaged my land. It's not coming back. $1,000 isn't going to cover. And see, here it is now that it's gone back a little bit. You can see all this silt, which is clay. It's just clay water. And this gentleman here is losing over 50 bushels an acre. And they say that, oh, in a few years he'll be fine. And they'll just say, well, we'll give you $1,000. No, this is permanent. You're going to have permanent yield loss. And he left this strip of soybeans there too, so he could tell if they were driving on his field. But you can see how badly it's all mixed. And that pile of topsoil that they have in the backside there is not going to provide 3 feet of coverage for the corn to grow. Next, please. And so here's just a picture of how heavy that silt water is in his beans. Next. And here's another one. Now this is on the opposite side because they were dewatering on both sides. This is them dewatering again, and you can see that the bags are there, but you know, the berm didn't hold, nor do they want it to, because they want that to drain out as fast as possible to work on the pipeline. Next. And here's just another example of, this is a different landowner, how they drained everything off into his field as well. And here's the hose, and it got to the point where they didn't even care anymore. They just left it there and said, what do you want us to write a check for? And the landowners are like, no, we don't want a check. We want you to stop this. And they're just like, oh, well, you signed an easement. We can do whatever we want to. It's our land now, is their attitude towards it. And so this is just another example of them mixing and compacting the soils. And this is where they parked every night. And again, this is so compacted up, it wouldn't drain either. I'm not quite sure what that landowner did. And here's a picture of a pit where I'm not sure if they were putting a valve in there or what they were using that for. I think they might have been looking for a tile, but again, it's just, you can see where the equipment went back and forth to push all that mud and that topsoil off to the side. So now they can start driving in, and there's a row of vehicles waiting for them and to get this moved out. And I want to explain that a lot of these farmers had to get people to do drones, because some of them got arrested for being on their own land, trying to stop them because they were violating what they said that they were going to do. And that's why you see a lot of drone flights. Next. And this is an example of how, again, it's so compacted, and they're going out there still, and they're trying to pump all that water out of there, and they've got nowhere to put it because they won't let them put it in the drain ditches because it'll clog them up. So again, they're just going to go ahead and pump it out into the fields, and you can see what a mess that is. You know, we have pictures of how very little is growing there now. Next. Same thing, dewatering, and this happens over and over and over, and it just breaks my heart, because one of these gentlemen just got his Century Award, and then 2 weeks later, this is what they did. And so when they say that they're going to take care of your land, and they're not going to do this, and they're not going to do this, what the problem was here they went underneath the highway. What they did is that Dakota Access said, well, we didn't do it. You know, you can't come after us. You need to go after Precision. You know, we told them not to do it. And it became this round robin of pointing the fingers. Next. And so all this matting material on this particular one didn't get removed. They don't have the time, and you can see how it's getting just so smashed into the topsoil. And you can see again that they're dewatering out into the fields. Next. And so when they're out there, you know, so the three biggest things that are permanent are the compaction of the soil, the mixing of the soil, And then you're tiling, and your tiling is really expensive to find out where it is and how to and to fix it. And so this is just a typical mess that they leave behind of all that matting material. And then you hit that with your plow and your equipment, and you're going to get some problems, and it will come through and pop tires. And that has happened before because there's rods in there holding those wood planks together. Next, please. So this is what they've called doing their restoration work. So they've gone through here and they've restored his land. And now they're going to put that little bit of black topsoil over the top of it to make it look dark and pretty. But nothing is going to grow there because it is so compacted. And that parent material that they brought up from 30 feet down that is acidic and is lacking microbial life, nothing will grow there. It'll go so far and then it dies is what happens. Next, please. And here we are a year later. And they said, Dakota Access said, after 3 years, you won't notice any difference. Well, it's pretty much still like that now. Next. So this is another one as well. And it's just over and over. And here it is a year later, same location. And it's still that way. You still have that big dead spot there because it got so packed and there's so much parent material and it was mixed so badly. Yeah. And they're not compensated for it. They never did. Dakota Access said, oh, well, too bad. And that was it. Next. And so here they are, which kind of kills me because they're spreading out. You can really kind of see how much topsoil they removed and how you're supposed to grow your crops on literally inches of topsoil. And they're using heavy equipment to kind of smooth things out, which is just compacting the ground more because of the weight of it. So what they do for restoration isn't really restoration. And here it's the same thing. That now they're trying to make it look pretty, but and you really need to have the drones to really see it. But there's no way that little bit of topsoil that they took off there is going to provide the natural feet that the landowners had to grow their crops. Corn roots will go down about 6 feet. And in these locations, they went down about 3 because that's what you can manually go down and decompact. And if it did come up, it died because the roots were trying to shoot off to the side and it hit that clay material. And see, this is what it looks like when they got done. And it looks pretty, but it's compacted as all get out and it's only inches deep. Next. And so that's what it looked like when they got done with their restoration. And so that's when Dakota Access said, we're all done, go ahead. And they even told people, and that's what it looks like now. They told them, well, why don't you just, grow hay? And they're like, we're not hay farmers. We are row crop farmers and we do corn and soy. And they're just like, oh, well, wait till next year. And then they were supposed to get some sort of a compensation commission together. And it became so horribly expensive and complicated that farmers couldn't afford to do anything. And so this is 2 years later, and this is where the pipeline went through. That's why there's those yellow tags there. And so now also because of what they did, there's also horrible erosion because when they leveled everything off, they didn't put all the contours back. And so now the ground is so compacted, it won't drain. And now it's washing away what little topsoil was there. And so now it's eroding everything. Next. And this is an area that continues to flood. And Dakota Access said, we replaced it once. It's not our fault. You must have done something. But they're like, no, there's a tile there that's either not running correctly or it got broken. Next. So here's the gentleman the um, off the right of way with his corn, and then on the right of way, and you can see that the corn is turning purple, and that's because of the mixing of the soils, and that corn will die. It won't get much bigger than that, then it will die out. Next. And this is showing you how sparse the beans are. He will lose a lot of these. And again, all of the erosion of the water just washing away and washing on what little topsoil. And you can see all the silt that's left behind because that's what was left underneath that little bit of topsoil. And what they were supposed to do too is that they were supposed to crown the pipeline with topsoil to accommodate for settling, and they didn't do that in anywhere in Iowa. And also, they put that valve site right next to this gentleman's living quarters. And I tried for about 3 or 4 days to find some sort of ruling on that, and I couldn't find it. It's buried too deep in different things. But if that valve goes off, that his place is gone, and hopefully he won't be in it. Here's where they went ahead and they put the riser on the wrong side of the fencing, and it's still flooding out in that corner. And again, you can see where all the mixing had occurred. Excuse me. Next. And this is another farmer, and again, because of how they went ahead and just leveled off the land, now it's eroding. And Dakota Access says that's not our problem. It must have been that way before. We didn't cause it. Prove that we caused it. And it's because of one, it's compacted down and it can't drain, and they destroyed the natural contours that were there. And then I'm not sure if that tile did get broken, but I think that there is a broken tile there because I look back at my notes, and if you can see in the middle where it's really wet, there's a tile there that is not working. Next. So this is a gentleman that had a berm between his neighbor's land and his land. And you can see where the pipeline, went through there, and Dakota Access refused to put the berm back. And so it's causing erosion as well. And here you can see how bad it is. Dakota Access did put that straw there, and they did stake it in, excuse me. But it's still causing erosion, and it is like that to this day. And this gentleman has fought and fought and fought because he said, why do I have to pay to have that put back when you tore it out? And he wants to be compensated for the erosion on his land, and they won't. They won't. So next. So here you can see now nothing is growing in that area. That's where they parked all their vehicles on that valve site. And you can see how now he can't drive across where he did along his fence line. Now he has to go further on down. But nothing is growing there because it is so packed. It's like concrete. So that's where they had to bring in the 10. So here's as of November 2021, and that's the same place. You can see, is that the same one? No, that's Lambs. You can see that scar is still there. You can get that off of Google Maps. Next. And that's the Verns. That's the one valve site with the valve right there next to his living quarters. And you can still see it there. You can see it all across the state. So when they come back and say it's going to be taken care of in a few years, no, it won't. When they say, well, it's only going to be between a 6 and a 24 inch, they're going to put in a 24 inch. And if you have tile, and I believe Minnesota, I think Peg said it was a 4-foot separation, they're going to have to go down deep to put that in. And if they go deep, then they have to go wide. And they get paid to put in tile or to put in the pipeline. And so it was heart-wrenching for me to see this. And I have a lot more, but these are just some of them. So you need to think long and hard. And the problem is too, is that you need to find out what recourse do you have before they even start. And that's something, because the people here did not know to band together and work together. That was the main problem here. They had no support from anybody. Not the governor's office, not our Iowa Board of Utilities, nobody. It's just a shame that they had nowhere to go to. But now that we know, we saw what happened, let's not repeat this again. So find out, what recourse do you have? How do you stop them from causing irreparable damage to your land? Because it is your land.